Hello, I'm Jonathan Scott, and welcome to On Air Education, a show dedicated to helping our teachers, parents, and students with both distance and blended education. We started this show in March of 2019. And at the time when we started, I read the paper and read the newspaper, which is something that my father said, stay informed. So I read the newspaper every day. And in reading the newspaper, I found out that here in Clark County, which is the 5th largest school district in the United States, with over 18,000 teachers and over 300,000 students, only 30% of the families in Clark County had Wi-Fi. So I knew that there was going to be a problem with distance learning. As a broadcaster for the last 40 years, I realized that perhaps some of the skills that I share with entertainers and broadcasters can help our teachers, can help our parents, and help our students with just that, with distance learning. We also learned very quickly that teaching math and science is different than teaching art and music, and that different people have different needs, such as English as a second language, which teachers refer to as ESL. Also, kids that need special attention, special education kids. How are they going to deal with distance learning when most of the teachers are used to a live classroom? Now they have to deal with a 13-inch computer screen. So throughout On-Air Education, we've invited teachers and actors and performers to share their skills in engagement. Now, in reading the newspaper the other day, I found this article about with the stroke of a pen, opportunities unlocked for Native students. And then I learned about Assembly Bill 262, which requires the Nevada system of higher education to waive registration per credit and other fees that come with enrolling in one of the state's universities for Native American students who are a member of one of Nevada's 27 federally recognized tribes. Those students will have to also demonstrate that they're eligible to enroll and have lived in the state of Nevada for at least 1 year. The 3 bills signed into law last Friday will profoundly change the quality of life for members of the state's 27 tribal nations, according to Stacey Montooth, a citizen of the Walker River Paiute Nation and executive director of the Nevada Indian Commission. According to Stacey, there's never been a better time to be indigenous and live in the state of Nevada. Please say hello to our special guest, Stacey Montooth. Stacey.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm just absolutely thrilled to be here. Thank you so
we're
much.
thrilled to have you here. And also joining us, a return guest on Air Education, a teacher at Rancho High School, civics teacher, history teacher, all around social studies teacher, Reuben De Silva. Thank you again for showing up. You're taking a little bit out of your vacation, and we appreciate it.
I'm glad to be here, Jonathan. Thank you.
So what did it take? I think you told me that it took 2 years. You've been working on this for 2 years to get this bill passed?
Well, we've been talking about it for decades. Literally, I can remember when I first returned to Northern Nevada with my contemporaries, and I've been around since 1966. We had been talking about how do we make college and university more accessible for our Native American students. And to be polite, Jonathan, Nevada is a little behind the 8 ball. In fact, many states throughout our country already offer a tuition waiver or free college tuition to their indigenous people of that territory.
Before we even go further, before you got here, I was talking about the word, I love wordplay, indigenous. What does the word indigenous mean? And then my high school teacher here said, tell me what you think it means.
Well, when it boils down to it, indigenous means the native people of that land. It's really a term that stems out of the colonization period. So as these Europeans are going around, conquering the world and colonizing, the entire planet, the word indigenous meant the natives of that land, the original peoples of that territory.
Absolutely. In the Great Basin, where you mentioned that 27 tribal nations, bands, and colonies are within what is now the state of Nevada, we have been stewards of this land for tens of thousands of years. In fact, we believe in our creation stories, we've been here since time started. It's very confusing to a lot of people outside of our communities. The federal term for my ethnicity is American Indian. However, you've probably heard those stories that guy that got in the boat and came over here in 1492, he actually never landed in what is now the United States or America. So to be called American Indians is a bit of a misnomer. My research indicates that the term Native American was actually found in academia. It was scientists who were in anthropology and archaeology departments, and their intent was to make a distinction between, as your colleague mentioned, the first people of the land, the people who were originally in a territory, versus Americans who were people that moved into the area. Indigenous has a global impact. Just again, as Reuben said, it applies to all the First Nations people in Canada, the first people in Australia, in all parts of the planet.
Alaska.
Absolutely.
No, what I was confused about was, did I say it right? Inuit?
The Inuit people.
Inuit people.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't want to make it even more complicated, but prior to what I'll call contact, Indian people referred to the people in this area, the Great Basin, we refer to ourselves by what we ate. So of the 27 tribal nations, most have their own labeling system, if you will. I am from the Waka River Paiute Nation, as you mentioned. We're the trout eaters, Aga Dukarai. So I, again, introduce myself and someone would know that's where I'm from. She's a trout eater. While my relatives from Fallon, they're the Doi Dukata eaters, the cattail eaters. So Indigenous really just unifies the entire globe.
Would Paiute be the largest populated tribe here in Nevada?
Well, you mentioned 27 tribal nations. Of those 27, we have 4 major bands. Paiute is actually divided into northern and southern Paiutes. We have similarities in our languages, similarities in our songs and our creation stories. We also have relatives, the Shoshones, and we also have relatives, the Washoe. But those are what we call the Big Four. So any native person indigenous to the Great Basin is either Paiute, Shoshone, or Washoe.
And Nevada was called the Great Basin?
Well, we still refer to it as the Great Basin. For Native people, geography is what set up our borders, right? And so Mother Nature, Mother Earth provided these amazing mountains, and within those mountains is a great big bowl, the Great Basin. And that's exactly how we identified our territories and shared territories.
So our topic really of interest really is education.
Sir.
So to stay on point, I have to tell you that my engagement tool throughout my 40-year career in broadcasting has been humor. And if you can get people to laugh, they'll listen to you. So I have to share something funny with you, and that Reuben knows. Reuben was on the show a few weeks ago with our friend Nelson Sardelli, and we did a show about history. When you confirmed and said you wanted to be on the show, I didn't think twice about inviting Reuben because of his ethnicity. I thought of inviting Reuben because he's a history and civics teacher, and I felt that he would add to our conversation. He gets me on the phone and he says, you know, I'm Eastern Indian, not Indian. And it didn't even dawn on me to even think that. And I thought, dummy. I kind of missed it. So again, to talk about education regarding I want to say Native American and Indian population here in town. What are you doing? How are you getting the word out to the people? And I understand that calling Indians the people was actually a way that they were referred to.
Right. The Numa, the Nui, the people. Right. So it's interesting. I think it's human nature. When there are opportunities in education, and when the word free is bandied around, you usually have a built-in audience. Having said that, just this morning, the Intertribal Council of Nevada, which is sort of like the United Nations of our native tribes, the leadership got together. We discussed how the process is going to work for our students to be able to take advantage of the tuition waiver. We actually have a group of very civic-minded, just beautiful souls who are actually going to take a tour, and they are going to get in a van just like a rock and roll band and go from one reservation to another reservation to another reservation, telling all of the communities about this opportunity. Not just the tuition waiver, but all the successful new laws that were passed this last session.
We're here with the executive director of, I want to say, the Nevada Indian Commission.
That's correct.
Stacey Montooth, and civics, history, social studies teacher Reuben De Silva. You're watching On Air Education. My name is Jonathan Scott. We're going to take a short commercial break and come on right back.
Whoever you are, you're one of us. Whatever you want, we'll get you there. If you're not like anyone else, you're just what we're looking for. It's time to enroll in your future. Nevada State College.
Welcome to the Great American Pub, a great place to hang out with your friends, watch a game, and enjoy some great pub food. Our kitchen is open 24/7 with our full menu. Try some of our signature dishes like lobster mac and cheese or clam chowder. Join us at the Great American Pub and enjoy happy hour specials. Grab a drink and enjoy great pub food from all over the country right here in Las Vegas. The Great American Pub with 2 great locations, 215 in Eastern and Flamingo in 215.
In a changing world, it's time to change how we look at college. That's why Nevada State College provides excellence with affordability, a campus with diversity, and programs that offer opportunity. Nevada State College. Be bold, be great, be state.
And we're back. Jonathan Scott here on Air Education. We're talking with Stacey Montooth, the executive director of Nevada Indian Commission, and also our friend Reuben De Silva, history teacher at Rancho?
Yes.
I got it right, Rancho High School. Boy, if I didn't have notes, I'd just be lost completely. So let's go back to talking about how Bill. Oh, actually, I've got a couple of quotes that I want to run past you. Janet Davis, chairwoman of the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe, which is again another, I don't know what they eat, but Lake Paiute Tribe.
An
said,
ancient fish.
They eat fish?
Kiwi. Yeah, it's an ancient fish.
Ancient fish?
Yes, sir.
I think on Sundays they serve that. You want to go on Friday?
Okay.
All right. Said it would allow all of our kids to go to school. Quote, a lot of the tribal kids do not want to be a burden on their parents. A lot of them come from economically disadvantaged families, and they feel it's a cost to their families and their tribes to go to school. What do you feel about that?
I think that Chair Davis is exactly right. She herself is a longtime educator, and she's seen it up close. The financial burden of college has always been a huge hurdle for Native American students. When we often say that when a student gets a degree, the entire family does, because there are so many shared sacrifices. Native American people are not self-made. We don't have the opportunity for self-wealth like the rest of America does, and if you'll invite me back, we can talk about that on another show.
Sure,
but
I'd love to do another show.
She is absolutely correct. This is going to change the course, the quality of life for the better for generations to come.
And Reuben, we talked about this when you were on last time. Mm-hmm. We talked about the schools are now being open, mm-hmm. and when I asked you how many kids are actually coming into class, you blew me away and you said 3. And I said 3%. You said no, 3 students. Mm-hmm. The schools are open and only 3 kids. And what I equate that to is that these kids, the high school kids mm-hmm. specifically, have gone out and gotten jobs, mm-hmm. and they're helping support their families. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that is true, somewhat. But there's some who've been accustomed to the fact of staying home now, and maybe don't see the need to really come back to school, at least with this year.
I'm used to staying home.
Yeah, and that's a broader sort of a phenomenon we're seeing across the country. There's this thing called the Great Resignation. I don't know if you've heard about that. That's coming up here, where a lot of economists are looking at this fall, this winter, where folks are just going to maybe change jobs and leave their jobs and maybe look at working from home. And this is also going to be something that we're going to see in the education
what do you call
as well. The Great Resignation.
The Great Resignation.
It's actually a sociological academic term that's just
socioeconomic. I love saying that. Assembly Bill 270 ensures funding to preserve Stewart Indian School. We spoke about that briefly, which for nearly a century was operated as a federally run boarding school, a relic of a time when indigenous children were taken from their families and forced to assimilate into white society.
That's right, Jonathan. It's one of the reasons why, as a whole, Native Americans on reservations see some of the highest unemployment. They have the lowest education outcomes. There's been a lot of headlines about this in the last few weeks because our Canadian relatives in residential schools have discovered this ugly, ugly truth that there were hundreds of children who went to these schools but never went home. I happen to have my office, a Nevada agency, on a former Indian boarding school campus. And when you dissect the federal government's intent, which was to forcibly assimilate my relatives, they didn't want them to be Indian anymore. They wanted them to be part of mainstream society. It still resonates today. I'm a direct descendant. My beautiful 95-year-old grandmother, she was taken to boarding school. And in 2021, we call it kidnapping. So she was kidnapped by representatives of the federal government and forced to go to a school that operated a lot like boot camp does. You know, when young women and young men in this country volunteer to go into the military. Their hair is cut, they're given uniforms, they don't speak unless they're spoken to. It's exactly how children as young as 4-year-old were treated. Extremely harsh, extremely cruel.
Our governor, Steve Sisolak, said the school grounds where the bill signing ceremony took place serve as a sobering reminder to our nation's history of forced assimilation. Watts, the Las Vegas assemblyman who sponsored the siren ban, noted that the 3 bills were just some of the laws passed this session aimed at recognizing and addressing the issues raised by Native Americans in the state. Taken together, this is a groundbreaking legislative session for advancing the rights and issues of Indigenous people and fostering inclusion among all of us. Agree?
Absolutely. The Las Vegas area Assemblyman Howard Watts really drove 2 critical pieces of legislation. It's hard to believe in this day and age, there are still towns in the state of Nevada that have sundowner sirens. The indigenous people that live within earshot of this have this horrific reminder that when that bell goes off every night, by law, they're supposed to get out of town before dark. Again, it's 2021, and for that to be still happening, it's just atrocious.
Amazing. It's amazing.
It is.
We're speaking with Stacey Montooth, the Executive Director of the Nevada Indian Commission, high school teacher Reuben De Silva. My name's Jonathan Scott. You're watching On Air Education. We're going to take one more short commercial break and come on back. Stay where you are.
Whoever you are, you're one of us. Whatever you want, we'll get you there. If you're not like anyone else, you're just what we're looking for. It's time to enroll in your future. Nevada State College.
Hello, my friends. Jonathan Scott here for Windows Plus to share some interesting new state-of-the-art developments in remodeling your windows and doors that'll save you big bucks on your power bill and change the look of your home. Vinyl windows and doors will have your air conditioner run quieter and more efficiently. Vinyl windows and doors will last you a lifetime and can save you lots of money. Visit our showroom at 5195 South Valley View, 3 blocks south of Tropicana. Call now and get 10% off our wholesale prices. Windows Plus, 702-450-2275.
In a changing world, it's time to change how we look at college. That's why Nevada State College provides excellence with affordability, a campus with diversity, and programs that offer opportunity. Nevada State College. Be bold, be great, be state.
And we're back. Jonathan Scott with On Air Education, Executive Director of the Nevada Indian Commission, Stacey Montooth, high school teacher Reuben De Silva. I've got it down now. Our associate producer, Carol Adams-Hattar, she submitted a couple of questions. One of them I think is very interesting, which is, since each tribal nation has complex histories and cultural backgrounds, how are you able to cover all the unique perspectives and historical significance of each?
That's a fantastic question, and I am going to make the assumption that she means the legislation that was passed to include multicultural education.
Yes.
Just those simple facts that we've discussed today, that there's 27 tribal nations, that there's the big 4, the major bands, that the people refer to themselves by what they ate. Those are commonalities that could really arm the average native Nevadan with some really, really good facts. We aren't looking necessarily for a deep dive. Those type of opportunities are available at the universities, but we just want every student who graduates from a public institution in this state to be able to have a good conversation with accurate information about not just the basic history, but the contemporary lifestyles of our tribal nations as well.
Well, here's a tough question, and I spoke with you on the phone about this, that I found out, not necessarily here in Nevada, but at some of the Navajo reservations, they didn't have electricity, and they didn't have running water. Does that exist here in Nevada as well?
You know, it's not nearly as prevalent. We do have instances where people don't have stable electricity or even safe water. I'm sorry to tell you, we have students on the McDermott Reservation in northern Nevada who they don't drink the water at school. They don't use the water fountains because there's bad chemicals in their water. So there are instances with some of our tribal nations where basic necessities aren't met. You mentioned your background in education, and I know Reuben experienced this firsthand, the distance learning, the way our country had to pivot from in-class learning to distance learning. Talk about a disadvantage for our tribal communities.
Well, that's another question from Carol. Do you feel that Native American students are being left behind?
Absolutely. The pandemic has just put a spotlight on all the inequities that our Native American communities endure. Everything from health care. You know, it's 3 times more likely if a Native American had to be hospitalized during the pandemic that they wouldn't go home. The highest rate of death of any subpop in the country. We have the lowest education outcomes. That's everything from the Read by 3 initiatives to all the standardized testings to actually graduating from high school. Again, some of our tribal nations have unemployment as high as 75%. So we absolutely have been left behind.
Well, I love that you're going from reservation to reservation, almost like the musicians used to go to radio stations, will you play my record? Almost like that. And I think, again, also on the phone, I told you that maybe 15 years ago I produced a documentary in the eastern states. And what I found out from this documentary, most people know that alcoholism is a huge problem on the reservation, but what they don't realize from the kids that are high school and teenage is that suicide is just as big a problem. And what do? And I think it all goes back to education and having the opportunity. Why, again, this is so great that this passed. But again, hopefully we're going to do our little part here to get the words out. If you know any families that are Indian families, Native American families, let them know that they have this opportunity available.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. This is an ideal forum to do that, and you're right in outlining those social ails, but things are getting better. I can't say that our tribal communities aren't impacted by alcoholism. It's not like it used to be, though, believe you me. And unfortunately, we have had some very serious suicide clusters. It has to do with, again, going from our traditional lifestyles where our relatives didn't stay in one place. They followed the food. They moved all over the Great Basin. Then all of a sudden, here comes the United States government. You know, they feel like the Indian people are in the way of progress. They go from a policy of annihilation and Indian wars to trying to put my relatives on remote, isolated areas. And then that wasn't working, so they tried the boarding schools. So when you look at the long history of deception, that's my word, it's understandable why this tuition waiver is just so monumental.
So you mentioned 75% unemployment. How are they surviving?
Well, that's a really great question. There is a federal trust responsibility between the United States government and federally recognized tribes. it goes back hundreds of years in legal documents where Uncle Sam made agreements most often for land in exchange for providing essential services, healthcare, education. And so a lot of times some of our smaller nations, or again the more really remote isolated areas, their tribal government is really dependent on federal grants, sometimes state programs. There's a lot of essential services that are supplemented by Nevada. When you live in the middle of the desert with a town, you know, as far away as an hour, and you have to take dirt roads to get there, there typically isn't a lot of employment opportunities. And I believe that was a strategy of the federal government.
Well, I knew this was going to go fast, and it has. So if you could just give me a short wrap-up of get your message out, this is your time.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that, and thank you for your time today, and thank you for all of your feedback as well. We, like every agency in the state, have a website. You can look at www.nevadaindiancommission.com, .gov.
I'm going to say it again, NevadaIndianCommission.gov, G-O-V.
Right? And a lot of folks love social media, so like us on Facebook, watch us on Twitter, and then come visit us. We have an amazing cultural center. We're just outside of, well, now we're in the city limits of Carson City. We're off of Schneider Avenue. Monday through Friday, we have this amazing cultural center. You can learn all about the history of the boarding schools.
Stacey Montooth, Executive Director, NevadaIndianCommission.gov. Reuben DeZilva, thank you again for joining us. Good luck on your backpacking. My name is Jonathan Scott. Like us and share us. Go on all of our social media at onaireducation.com. I want to thank you for tuning in, and please be nice to each other. Eat well, party hard. Thanks for tuning in.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Scott, the producer of On Air Education, inviting you to enroll in our 5-day on-air beginning broadcasting workshop, teaching you the ins and outs of what it takes to be on television, radio, and podcasts with real on-the-air training and professional guest speakers from the broadcast industry. Introduce yourself with a brief 60-second video using your phone camera. Beginning broadcasting workshop is limited to only 12 students. Tuition is $995 and all major credit cards are accepted. Email us at news1lasvegas@gmail.com.